Hey everyone, I'm Jim Williams, host of the Politically Incorrect podcast. We are in the 67th day of the war between Israel and Hamas. What we're going to do here on the podcast is we're going to take a look at the headlines from what's going on the ground in Israel as well as what's going on here in the United States. So, before we get started on the headlines, we're going to let you watch today's briefing from Elon Levy, who, of course, is the government spokesperson for the Israeli government. And this is his morning briefing. All right? And then we'll hit the headlines right after that.
I'm Israeli government spokesman Elon Levy. This is day 68 of the October 7th war. First, a brief update, and then we will take your questions. As always, we'll start with the latest figures. Since the start of the October 7th massacre, Hamas has fired more than 12,000 missiles at Israel. We are targeting those launchers and thwarting imminent missile attacks, with the recent airstrike taking out terrorists in Sheja'iyah who are about to fire at Israeli communities. More than 2,000 of Hamas's rockets have misfired, the large majority landing inside Gaza and causing untold damage and casualties there. The IDF has notified families of the deaths of 444 soldiers. IDF fatalities have risen by 10 since yesterday's update, with the confirmed deaths of Colonel Itzhak Ben Basat, Sergeant Eran Aloni, Sergeant First Class Rom Hecht, Major Ben Shelley, Captain Liel Hayo, Staff Sergeant Oria Yaakov, Sergeant Achia Daskal, Major Moshe Avram Baon, Major Roy Meldasi, Lieutenant Colonel Tomer Greenberg. They were our finest sons, and the whole nation's hearts broke this morning to hear that awful news that they bravely fell in battle. Our thoughts are with their families, and may their memory be a blessing. An update on the hostages. The number of hostages in Hamas captivity since 10/7 has gone down to 135 after IDF special forces secured the bodies of 2 hostages. Eden Zakaria, 27, was abducted from the Nova Music Festival and subsequently murdered in captivity. IDF Command Sergeant Major Ziv Dado, 36, was taken hostage while on active duty on 10/7 and was also murdered. Special forces found their bodies underground in a densely populated area in Gaza, and their bodies have now been returned to Israel for burial. Of the remaining 135 hostages, 116 are males and 19 females. The remaining hostages include 2 children, the Bibas infants, abducted together with their mother Shiri. Hamas is still holding for a ransom the bodies of 19 hostages murdered in captivity since 10/7. Freeing our vulnerable hostages from the Hamas terror dungeons is a global fight, and we are furious that the world and the Red Cross have not done enough to pressure Hamas to release them. We will not rest until we have completed our mission to bring them all back home. There will be no one left behind. Time is running out, and none of us are free till all of them are free. An operational update. Following a situation assessment yesterday, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has stated that Hamas forces in northern Gaza, including Gaza City, are on the verge of collapse. That comes after hundreds of terrorists were killed in intense fighting and hundreds more surrendered. Israeli forces continue close-quarter fighting with Hamas terrorists disguised as civilians and operating out of civilian buildings. We are operating deep inside Hamas's strongholds in Khan Yunis, Jabalia and Sheja'iyah, engaging them in face-to-face combat. The Golani Brigade has been targeting terror infrastructure in the Sheja'iyah Kasbah, the marketplace, where Hamas has been operating from inside and underneath civilian areas. Over the past day, our forces have conducted over 250 precise strikes on terror targets across the Gaza Strip, and that campaign continues. On the northern front, the IDF remains on high alert to deter any further aggression against our people and prevent other actors from entering this war. Yesterday, we saw 3 launches to Israeli territory from Syria, one of those falling in an open area in Israel. In response, overnight, IDF aircraft and tanks struck military assets belonging to the Syrian army in Syrian territory. The IDF continues to respond firmly to Hezbollah's unprovoked aggression from Lebanon, including a missile attack that set off a red alert siren in Acre and was intercepted by the Iron Dome system. The IDF has struck Hezbollah infrastructure in Lebanon in response to those cross-border attacks, including with anti-tank missiles and mortar shells. An important diplomatic update. The State of Israel deplores the vote at the United Nations General Assembly yesterday to keep the Hamas terror regime on life support after 10/7. Hamas continues to threaten us with more October 7 massacres, and any end to the fighting that leaves Hamas still standing will leave it free and emboldened to massacre our people again. Anyone calling for a sustainable ceasefire with Hamas is calling to leave its rapists free to reoffend. That will not happen. In its vote, the General Assembly seeks to condemn us here to a cycle of violence that we are determined to end with the end of Hamas. Fortunately, the General Assembly doesn't get to decide whether the Hamas terror regime will survive this defensive campaign. We get to decide that, and we will continue fighting the October 7th monsters. This week, we set the diplomat babysitter test as our standard for ending this war. This war will end when the foreign diplomats trying to throw Hamas a lifeline would feel safe babysitting our children in Kfar Aza, Be'eri, or near Oz. Right now, I don't think even after a humanitarian ceasefire, any of those 153 ambassadors would volunteer to babysit children in Kfar Aza, and frankly, after yesterday's horrifying lapse of judgment, we wouldn't let any of them near our children anyway. For our children to sleep safely in the communities destroyed on October 7th, the Hamas terror regime will no longer be their neighbor. We thank the 9 brave nations that voted against Hamas, showing great moral leadership and clarity in reaffirming our duty to defend ourselves. Chief among them, our allies in the United States, but also Austria, the Czech Republic, Guatemala, Liberia, Micronesia, Nauru, Papua New Guinea, and Paraguay. We note that Australia, New Zealand, and Canada have issued a joint statement demanding that Hamas lay down its arms. We are also calling on Hamas to surrender, but should it choose to ignore that communique, we will continue to fight Hamas until it is destroyed and until it is safe for our children to sleep in Kfar Aza and Be'eri again. That is the goal of this war. An update now on the humanitarian front. Yesterday, Israel opened the Kerem Shalom crossing for the inspection of aid trucks to Gaza, making it possible to more than double the flow of aid to civilians in the Gaza Strip. Yesterday, we inspected 195 trucks with 2,740 tons of aid on board, and we can now facilitate twice as much going into Gaza. We repeat, Israel has placed 0 restrictions, 0, on the entry of humanitarian necessities to Gaza, and we have approved all requests, every single one, to facilitate the provision of food, water, and medical supplies, and we have the capacity to more than double that aid if the UN is able to deliver it. The problem is threefold. One, a backlog at Rafah. We saw this morning aid trucks waiting for more than an hour and a half outside Rafah, waiting for the Palestinian side to open the gate. Two, the fact that aid agencies are not managing to distribute aid at the pace that Israel is inspecting it. And three, the fact that Hamas is stealing aid while the agencies that feign concern for civilians in Gaza are complicit with Hamas's abuse of civilians through their silence. Now, in the interest of expediting the delivery of humanitarian aid, the IDF is using tactical pauses to allow civilians to replenish stocks. One such pause was in place today in the Al-Shabora neighborhood of Rafah from 10 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. Now, we've seen the obscene claims by UNRWA and other Palestinian and international actors trying to blame Israel for the humanitarian situation in Gaza to cover up for their own incompetence and the fact that they are covering up for Hamas. This is regrettable, and we expect people to see through this in light of all the publicly available facts. As Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said last night, we are determined to continue until total victory, and there can be no compromise with the Hamas terror regime. We will continue our defensive campaign until all our goals are achieved, eliminating Hamas, securing the release of all the hostages, and removing any threat to our people from the Gaza Strip. That's the end of today's update. We'll now take your questions. As always, if you can submit those questions in advance, we'll be able to get the necessary statistics and data for you. But please type your name and news agency into the chat box, and we'll take your questions now.
Question from Joel Pollack from Breitbart News. How does Israel respond to President Joe Biden's claims that Israel is engaged in indiscriminate bombing, that it is losing support around the world, and that it must remove certain parties from the government.
President Biden, our friend and ally, also stated that Israel enjoys the support of most of the world, and we enjoy the support of most of the world because the whole world saw the atrocities that Hamas perpetrated on 10/7 and understands that this war can only end with the end of Hamas. Now, we know that perhaps some nations are beginning to lose their nerve as difficult images come out of Gaza, as Hamas deliberately tries to endanger and sacrifice their civilians, sick and twisted as it is, in order to generate sympathy, in the hope that will generate pressure, in the hope that that will stop Israel from defending ourselves. But we will continue targeting Hamas with unprecedented precision. If you look at the statistics, we have struck, I believe, 22,000 targets inside the Gaza Strip, and even if you buy the statistics put forward by the Hamas-run health ministry, which we dispute, you're looking at less than 0.8 casualties per strike. That is unprecedented precision. We are making efforts that no army in history has made in order to protect civilians in a counter-terrorism war in urban areas. We will continue doing everything we can in order to protect civilians on the other side from their own leaders' attempts to sacrifice them, and continue that precision campaign against the October 7th monsters and all the terrorists who have been threatening us with more repeat October 7 massacres. And that's why we're grateful that the United States stands shoulder to shoulder with us, and the President has said that the United States will continue sending all the material that we need in order to continue this war until victory and the destruction of Hamas.
Question from Hannah Julian from the Jewish Press. Does the current campaign to eliminate Hamas include its senior command and operatives in the Palestinian Authority-controlled territories?
Every Hamas terrorist is a dead man walking.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all. Thank you very much. We'll update you tomorrow about the timing of the next briefing. Everyone stay safe, please, and happy Hanukkah. Thank you.
All right. That was Ivan Levy, spokesperson for the Israeli government, and that was his morning briefing. Let's kind of begin. Elon spoke about the hostages, and here in Washington this afternoon, President Biden met with the hostage families at the White House. He, along with Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, met with a number of families, actually 8 families, who right now have been held captive by Hamas during the deadly October 7th attack. The White House has said, and it was reiterated today by President Biden, that they will not rest until not just the U.S. hostages are returned to Israel, but of course all of them, as Elon said, around 138 or 139 hostages. Basically, in the readout from the White House, which we just got, here's a quote from National Security Council spokesman John Kirby, and he said that he'll guarantee, meaning, of course, that the president being he will guarantee them what we're not going to lose 8 of their loved ones. We're not going to stop trying to get them home, Kirby said. As he previewed Biden's message to the families, Kirby stressed that U.S. officials are trying to get more information about them and working on a deal to bring all the hostages home. Now, it should be noted that Biden, while he was meeting with hostage families, Jake Sullivan, who is his national security advisor, is on his way to Israel to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, members of his cabinet, and the Israeli President Isaac Herzog. The goal there is to work on a strategic way to not only better fight the war with the help of the United States, but at the same time doing whatever they can, meaning Sullivan and the U.S. team, to help return the hostages. So Jake Sullivan en route to Israel. He should be there sometime this evening. He'll be meeting tomorrow with Netanyahu and the cabinet and President Herzog. So we'll keep you updated on that. Let's talk about Congress and getting out of town with passing any aid to Israel and Ukraine. Okay, President Biden, along with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, are closing in on a deal. All right, the holdup for the money for Ukraine and Israel, as well as the southern border and Taiwan, which is a $106 billion deal, which President Biden has put forth, and it has been championed and headed through the Senate by Chuck Schumer. The holdup is that the money on the southern border is not the issue. The issue is the Republicans want changes to some of the issues there. Some of it going back to perhaps even some former President Trump's policies to be reenacted. I don't believe that's what's going to happen. I think that they're going to strike a deal. It is not going to come by Friday, which is when Congress will be leaving for the holiday. Okay, it will be coming in January. Both sides want to do a deal, all right, and neither of them want to be involved in holding up aid that is desperately needed by the Ukraine and by Israel. So it won't come in time for Friday's holiday break, but I expect it soon afterwards, in the first couple weeks of January, barring any unforeseen problems. And heaven knows that dealing with Congress, there's any number of problems that can come up. But I think that they're going to get that deal passed. We will keep you posted on it, but we got 2 days to get that done, and I don't think that's going to happen. But President Zelensky was here yesterday in Washington, D.C., and had an opportunity to meet with both Republicans and Democrats, and he understands that they all feel strongly about getting funding to him. It's really a matter of domestic issues, not international issues, that is holding that up. Okay? All right, let's move to another point that Elon spoke about, and that's a convoy of 80 trucks for Gaza was sent from Egypt to Kerem Shalom crossing for checks on Tuesday afternoon. The new inspection system was opened in an effort to accelerate aid, and since aid deliveries began on October 20, supplies have been entering Gaza from Egypt, and they've been in a loop basically from Rafah to be inspected at the Al-Bazana crossing on Egypt's border with Israel. Okay, now as you heard from Elon, the amount of humanitarian aid that's getting through is being held up in a bottleneck basically by the agencies who are going to use that aid to get it to the folks in the Gaza Strip. So right now it's not an issue of Israel delivering enough aid. It's a matter of whether or not the agencies who have been tasked with getting that aid to the folks in Gaza that need it, getting it there. So right now, Israel is getting aid there. They now have 2 border crossings that they're using, and at this point in time, we will see how things continue to work. One would hope that those tasked with the distribution of the aid would be able to step up the speed with which they get it to the Palestinians who are in need of it. Okay, so that's that particular headline. Let's move up. Unfortunately, today, as I believe Elon also talked about in his update, 9 Israeli soldiers were killed as ground offensive continues in Gaza. The attack was in an urban area, very dense neighborhood, came after repeated recent claims that the Israeli military that it had broken Hamas's command structure in northern Gaza. So we are sorry to hear about the loss of life of the Israeli soldiers, and that is unfortunately something that happens when you are in close contact, as they are in situations like that. All right. So those are basically your headlines for day 67 of this war, and we are going to keep you posted every day with both Elon's press briefing as well as the headlines as we can get them in and quickly get them to you. So that's what we're going to be doing, and so we're going to be doing that along with guests that will be coming on. We're going to have members of the press who cover this, both on the ground in Israel as well as here in the United States, lawmakers and others who will be coming to visit us here on the Politically Incorrect podcast. So we want to thank you for joining us. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe, hit the bell, like us, okay? It's a very simple thing to do. It doesn't cost you anything to do it, but it certainly lets us know. There's comments below. We will answer those comments and happily answer those comments should you wish to give them to us. If you're going to listen to us as the podcast, not a problem. You can find us at Apple, Amazon Music, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and basically, as the old saying goes, wherever you get your podcasts, all right? So anyway, that is today's edition of the Politically Incorrect podcast. I'm Jim Williams. Thank you for your time, and we will see you tomorrow. Be safe, and happy Hanukkah for those out there. Just one more day to go. Take care. Bye.